What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Modern video, and today we're going to be taking a look at a deck that is probably the closest thing we have to a mid-range deck available to us in the format, and it plays very nicely. It has found a lot of success in this Nadu format and has kind of changed my thinking of how the Nadu matchup works in kind of the grand scheme of things, because Boros has been seeming to do a very good job handling a mostly Nadu / like just got control kind of meta that we've got brewing on here. Hopefully not for long, but you know, we're got Boros energy deck that we're going to look at. This list in particular is by Eric Henning, who went 6-0-2 at the NRG $10,000 showdown at Chicagoland, Illinois, just this past weekend. We're going to be kind of going over why the Boros energy deck seems to be finding kind of its footing in the metagame and what this deck is doing that I particularly like, and some of the other ways that you can kind of build these, you know, white-red X like mid-range / like energy decks. So of course, before we get too deep into the deck and we dive into what exactly is going on in the Boros energy deck, if you're not already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more videos from me where we dive into the Modern and Pioneer format along with some other longer form videos kind of pertaining to those formats, then please consider subscribing and ring the notification bell so you know when those videos get posted. It's a nice, free, easy way to support me and my content, as of course we are trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year and try to get things rolling on to hopefully doing some bigger and better things on the channel. So yeah, that's my shilling out of the way, I suppose. Let's go ahead and talk about this Boros energy deck. So Boros energy, as I kind of stated earlier, feels like it's kind of the mid-range deck of the format. And I don't think we really think of, you know, white-red as kind of like the mid-range style of strategies. We always think of like splashing black or even just like playing black in our deck as kind of like these mid-range decks. We're so used to Rakdos kind of being the thing that saying that Boros energy is a mid-range deck is kind of weird. And it does so pretty effectively, honestly. So as far as like creatures and stuff, we have Guide of Souls, our first MH3 card we're going to talk about. So when this was spoiled, this is basically just an amped up Soul Sister. You know, it's a 1/2 instead of a 1/1, still 1 white mana. Gets you a life whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, and you get an energy counter. And then it also becomes an energy sink as well. Whenever you attack, you may pay 3 energy counters. When you do, put 2 +1/+1 counters on a flying counter on target attacking creature. It becomes an angel in addition to its other types. It being an angel really doesn't matter too much, but the fact that you can kind of get away with, you know, making extra energy from some of the other cards in your deck, plus having multiple Guide of Souls going with some other synergies that we're going to point out later. You can just kind of spread a lot of power onto the battlefield. Heck, you can even turn Guide of Souls into a 3/4 flyer that is just going to get you value by playing other creatures and stuff, getting more energy, meaning that you can then give other creatures flying and +1/+1 counters, meaning that you can kind of close out the game very quickly by kind of like stockpiling this energy. And then if you don't pay it into the Guide of Souls, then you have some other energy payoffs as well that can put that energy to good use. So Guide of Souls all around is just a very, very good creature in this deck and is a great turn 1 play. There's also another card from MH3, which is this card Ocelot Pride, that for a 1 white, first strike, lifelink, 1/1, with the Ascend ability or mechanic, whatever you want to call it. If you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. So how is that important? Well, at the beginning of your end step, if you gain life this turn, you create a 1/1 white cat creature token. Then if you have the City's Blessing, for each token you control that entered the battlefield this turn, you create a token that's a copy of it. So with multiple Ocelot Prides going and the City's Blessing, you are able to then just generate tons and tons of cats. I mean, if you have multiple Ocelot Prides going, you make one, and then you have the City's Blessing, you end up making another one. Then you have another Ocelot Pride that's going to make a third one, essentially, for that turn, and then it's going to make it 6. So with 2 Ocelot Prides, you have 6 on the battlefield, and then as you kind of get more Ocelot Prides going, then you're just going to end up making a ton of cats, which is going to work very well with our next MH3 card in Ajani Nakatl Pariah, which enters the battlefield, makes a 2/1, and then whenever one or more other cats you control dies, you can exile it, return to the battlefield under its owner's control, which then turns into a Ajani Nakatl Avenger, which means it has the abilities of +2 to put them up to 5 loyalty. You can put a +1/+1 counter on each cat you control. you can make a 2/1 cat warrior with a 0 ability, and then if you control another red permanent other than a Johnny Nakatl Avenger, deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to any target, and then -4, each opponent chooses an artifact, creature, or an enchantment and a planeswalker from among the non-land permanents they control, and then sacrifice the rest. So the -4 ability, I'm sure it can probably come up, especially in these mirrors, where if you kind of have multiple Ocelot Prides, or, in some of the, Mardu variants of this deck where they get to play Chthonian Nightmare, and you're kind of looping a Johnny's, and you're looping these other creatures, and you're making cats and whatnot, or even just putting creatures onto the battlefield. Using a Johnny is, the -4 is going to work out in those scenarios, just because you're going to be able to hopefully get a ton of creatures off the battlefield before your opponent's able to use their Johnny Nakatl Avenger to good effect. But, overall, this card has outperformed, I think, any expectations from anybody else. I think other people were calling it insane. Other people were saying it was mid. And I don't know if it's necessarily, the most insane flip Planeswalker, but it's been very, very powerful when I've seen it kind of go off. And again, when you have like the black variants of these Boros energy decks that are playing like Chthonian Nightmare and whatnot, looping a Johnny's is pretty good, because then you can just make a ton of cats and then just kind of keep going from there. And the more times you're able to cast Chthonian Nightmare, the more you're able to kind of make cats with the Nakatl Pariah entering the battlefield, and then making cats with the flipped Ajani on the other side, which is pretty neat. Continuing on, Amp Raptor, 2-mana, 2/1, first strike. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy, and then it does like this cascade effect if you cast it from your hand. So you exile cards from the top of your library if you cast it from your hand until you exile a non-land card, and then you may cast that card by paying an amount of energy equal to its mana cost rather than, paying its mana cost. So Amp Raptor in this deck, a lot of the times on turn 2, is going to be able to cast everything except for Blood Moon, Flage, and Fable the Mirrorbreaker. And then from there, if you have a Guide of Souls in play, you can stack the triggers, and you stack them correctly. You'll end up having 3 energy, so you're able to actually do this, kind of giving you the start that you want. Being able to go into something like a Blood Moon or even a Fable the Mirrorbreaker is pretty backbreaking. But obviously hitting any sort of non-land spell is going to be very good for you. Hitting like Ocelot Prides or another Guide of Souls is going to be pretty good for future Amped Raptors going forward. Of course, giving this 2 counters and flying makes it very hard to deal with, because a 4-power first striker is already very hard to deal with, and then also giving it flying means that it has even less creatures that can actually check the Raptor, which means that it's probably going to end up going the distance, barring like a removal spell or anything like that. Another card, we have Phalia Exuberant Shepherd. This is kind of the, at least in my opinion, the cutest art in the Modern Horizons 3 set. It has a legendary dog, 2-mana, 2/2 with flash. When it enters the battlefield, when Shepherd attacks, exile up to 1 other target non-land permanent. At the beginning of the next end step, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. If it entered under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on Phalia. So you're able to kind of get more Guide of Souls triggers, more Ocelot Pride triggers, Ajani triggers, and whatnot. Just a lot of different things that you can kind of exile. Of course, it doesn't have to be even a creature. It can be another non-land permanent, so you can kind of reset your Static Prisons, reset Unstable Amulet, reset Fable the Mirrorbreaker, and just kind of go through and get that value and everything like that. Phalia has been a pretty cool addition to the deck. I've never actually seen this, do any sort of work in any of the live matches that I've seen, but definitely the potential is there to kind of flicker some important non-land permanents, whether it's your opponent's getting a big blocker out of the way to set up a big attack, or even just getting value from your things. That's going to be a pretty nice addition to the deck. 3 Flage. Didn't even realize that every single creature in this deck was from Modern Horizons 3, so good on MH3, making a bunch of really good playable cards. Actually, most of this deck is. Anyway, so 3-mana, 6/6, enters the battlefield, sacrifice unless it escaped, and then whenever it enters, you get to Lightning Helix any target, and you gain 3 life. Escape for double red and double white. This was a card that I know on the podcast, at least I thought that it was going to be able to go somewhere. Randy was kind of like iffy on what it would do, and turns out Flage is just one of the best creatures in the format currently. One of the best 3-mana creatures not named Nadu. And it's definitely kind of proven its worth. I think that it made it pretty hard to be an aggressive strategy not playing Flage, because the 3 damage does deal with a lot of things, and the fact that late game this can come back and just end up closing out a game very, very quickly, and also make it very hard for your opponent to kind of come back and close out the game as well, is just a tool that I think went underestimated by like a lot of players, and end up being like in the practice of it, ended up becoming one of the best creatures in the format. So, Flage, definitely going to be up there. Go get them if you haven't already, because they're starting to get pretty ridiculous, over $30 a copy. Going deeper into the spells, we have some other energy payoffs in Galvanic Discharge, which essentially is the Harness Lightning, but for 1 mana, you target a creature or planeswalker, you get 3 energy, and then you pay an amount of energy, and it deals that much damage to that permanent. So you can kind of store up energy this way. If you deal with like a 1 or 2 toughness or a 1 or 2 loyalty planeswalker, you end up getting energy, and so on, and you don't even have to spend the energy necessary when you target the thing. So if you just want to get the energy, maybe if you want to activate a Guide of Souls trigger for lethal, you can just target something and then choose not to deal the damage to it. We have a good old Lightning Bolt, 1 mana, deal 3 damage to any target, is still good in the modern format here in 2024. Unstable Amulet is a card that it seems like a lot of players are kind of cutting. I think this used to be kind of 4 copies in the main deck, and then this is just slowly getting phased out for other cards that we'll kind of go over here in a minute. But for 2 mana, it enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, it deals 1 damage each opponent, so you can get a little bit of value from something like an Amped Raptor, getting Flages back from the graveyard. Any sort of way that cards maybe end up in exile or cast from your deck or whatnot, as long as it's not from your hand, it's going to deal damage to each opponent. And then you can tap and pay 2 energy and exile the top card of your library. You may play it until you exile another card with Unstable Amulet, meaning that essentially you don't have to worry about being able to play that card that turn. You can just, play it whenever you have the ability to. Or if you don't want to, you can just get rid of it and try to get a new card with Unstable Amulet. Going farther down, we have Static Prison, which is kind of another energy-esque payoff. It enters, you exile target non-land permanent and opponent controls until it leaves the battlefield, and you get 2 energy. And then at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you sacrifice it unless you pay an energy. So notably, you get to see your draw step before you end up actually paying for the Static Prison, which is a nice little bonus. It gives you additional information if you want to keep it exiled, or if you have like another way to deal with the permanent. Maybe your opponent's played something that matters a little bit more, and you have like another card that you can deal with the other permanent or whatever. So things can change kind of with like the draw step and whatnot. So Static Prison giving you that option is just a slight little upgrade versus, having to do in the upkeep like most of the other cards that do this. Blood Moon, pretty straightforward, non-basic lands or mountains. This is still very good going into 2024, and it's probably still even pretty good like in these mirrors and stuff, because you see there's like 2 basic planes in this deck, 1 mountain, so you have like 2 out of 21 lands that are going to actually tap for mana that you're going to care about. But in this deck in particular, minus like Flage, you're able to play everything off of 1 white, so you can easily play around your own Blood Moon. You have a decent amount of red effects. You have a good amount of like card advantage and things that you can do. Ocelot Pride plus Guide of Souls with like a Blood Moon in play is slowly going to close out the game, because you're going to be able to gain life with the Ocelot Pride, and then you're going to eventually be able to have enough cats come into play where then Guide of Souls is going to start getting you additional energy, which means the Ocelot Pride is going to get bigger and so on. We're just going to kind of snowball from there. Fable the Mirrorbreaker we touched on earlier. This is just a great reason to play red in your mid-range decks. It's a 2-for-1 already on the battlefield. And if this gets to stick around, boy, extra Guide of Souls, Ocelot Prides, Amped Raptors, really not that great, but having a board full of like 2 mana 2/1s that have first strike and they're just going to get you a ton of energy is pretty good. But Ocelot Pride is mainly the thing that you're going to want to target, just because you're then going to make insane amounts of 1/1 tokens to kind of flood the board, get a ton of energy, and Guide of Souls in multiples is just going to wreck face. The mana base, you have 4 Aether Hub. This enters, you get an energy, and you can add a mana of any color for the cost of an energy. We have Arena of Glory, which is course cut off. Taps for a red, comes into play tapped unless you control a mountain, and then you can pay a red and tap it to exert it to add 2 red. This kind of gives you a way to kind of give some of your creatures haste. You don't have to necessarily pay the red cost in it. So for something like Ophelia, you could use 1 of the red to make sure it comes into play with haste. Another easy way of doing it is to kind of like give you 2 red So when you escape Flage, that you can give it haste and be able to attack with it. Whatnot. That's 12 points of damage from the ETB, the attack trigger, and then of course the 6 power that it has. You have Arid Mesas, you have Elegant Parlor, just a way to counter Surveil. Surveil lands have been kind of a staple of the format, and this is no exception. You have 3 Marsh Flats, you have 2 Winds of Teeth to round out your fetch lands, and of course you have 4 Sacred Foundry, 2 Plains, and a Mountain. Sideboard, Deafening Silence. Each player can't cast more than 1 non-creature spell each turn. Celestial Purge, getting rid of a black or red permanent. Drannith Magistrate, opponents can't cast spells from anywhere outside of their hands. Just good. Storm Hate. Harsh Mentor is very good Nadu Hate. So whenever an opponent activates the ability of an artifact, creature, or land on the battlefield that isn't a mana ability, it's going to deal 2 damage to that player, and you're able to play through your own Harsh Mentor if it ever really came up. Unlicensed Hearse to deal with the graveyard, and Aware Terror to deal with those just random artifacts and enchantments that could just kind of stop you from getting to enact your game plan. And that's the Boros Energy deck for the modern format. I talked about how there are some things in the Boros Energy deck that I didn't really like over, some of the other variants. The Mardu one, I'm a pretty big fan of, just because it is absolutely grindy with cards like Orcish Bowmaster, Chthonian Nightmare, and Thoughtseize. You have a lot of other kind of grindy elements where you can kind of do the same thing that this Boros deck is doing, and just kind of have a little bit more of a value / mid-range plan going. That's a lot harder for your opponent to deal with. That said, just being straight Boros, being white-red, makes it a lot harder to get got by Blood Moons. Blood Moon seems to be the kind of card that these decks are playing, whether it's 2 copies, 3 or 4, whatever. They're showing up in multiples in deck lists, and I think it's worth kind of playing the less mana, or the less color-intensive mana base currently in this format, and just being straight white-red. You don't need to be black for anything else, and you can just kind of go and do your thing and kind of end games before they really ever get started for your opponent. But yeah, that's the Boros Energy deck for the modern format. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like on the video, comment down below what modern deck you would like to see next. What would you like to be featured on the channel and whatnot? Of course, subscribe, ring notification bell so you know when future videos get posted. This is still a free, easy way to support me and my content, and we are getting so close to 1,000. I just greatly appreciate all the support I've gotten from everybody that has chosen to support me now and will in the future, so I'm greatly appreciative of that. So that's it for me. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you all in the next one.